You are now tuning in to the Going North podcast with your host, best-selling author, professional speaker, and member of the John Maxwell team, Dominic Dom Brightman. And every Monday and Thursday, we're going to hear the voice of a different author sharing their gifts, stories, and expertise to help you charge forward in life. Now let's get on with the show. And today on the Going North podcast, where we bring you some fabulous humans from across the globe. Today's no different because we got a fabulous author in the house. A fabulous author from across, well, actually, in her words, she's actually from the future because she's 12 hours ahead of me. Funny enough, all the way out in Australia. This fabulous lady right here, we've been connected together. We went through Mr. TS himself, Mr. Tyson Sharp, and he's a sharp fellow with a sharp mind who connected me with this fabulous lady right here who has one of the most awesome voices ever, Miss JF herself, author of The Power of a Peaceful Woman, the one and only JF herself, Miss Jennifer Forster. How you doing today, Jen?
Oh my goodness, Dom, what a beautiful introduction. And can I say just off the top, as an Australian, I am going to fully receive your compliment about my speaking voice because Australian accents don't generally get a good rap. I think we sound a little, I don't know, tinny or it's strange to have that compliment. But I'm going to take it. I'm going to fully receive it. Thank you. And thank you for having me on your amazing podcast.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And I do love accents too. So maybe that's me. I don't know. But yeah, definitely love your voice indeed. Heck, even at let's see, I think John Michael was another Australian out on the show, and dude dropped a whole lot of wisdom, and you yourself are filled with wisdom. And funny enough, read through the introduction of your book and found out that not only the fact that you published a book, but you actually had your own book of wisdom from yourself.
Yes, that's an interesting story. And it was really important for me to share that story in the book because when I went back over the birth or the beginnings of the wisdom that is in my book, which is called The Power of a Peaceful Woman. But more importantly to this story is that it's my 49 ways to drop the armor and diffuse the drama. Now, initially, that the working title of the book was my 49 life lessons. It took me 50 years to learn, unlearn, and relearn. And when I was looking back on the birth of my own, I guess, quest, spiritual journey, self-development, growth, expansion, exploration, any of those words, it began with a notebook, which I talk about in the preface of my book. And the notebook came from a woman who, to me, was the wisest, most profound, most inspiring person that I had ever met. And I met her at a really vulnerable time in my life. So it was at the time that I had made the decision to walk away from what on the outside looked like the perfect family of four. But for me, inside of myself, I knew deep down I wasn't happy. But having made that decision, I found myself in this territory of never feeling so certain or so off course in one moment. And that's what I was experiencing. I knew deep down the decision was the right decision, but that decision had catapulted me into some territory that, if I just had to describe it, was just fog, nothing but white, hazy fog. And it was at that time I met this incredible woman. Her name was Fran, and I do talk about her in the book. I refer to her as my Mrs. Miyagi. And if you know the book, the movie, The Karate Kid, Mr. Miyagi was this mentor and wealth of wisdom for Daniel during a really, expansive growth part of his life as well. So, yeah, so the way it happened was I was coming to work every day. I worked with Fran and I was coming to work every day just in this complete jumble and confusion around this decision that I'd made. And I arrived at work one day and on my desk was this notebook. It had on the cover, Recipe for Life notebook. And it had this weird little wooden spoon tied to it. It was so strange. And inside the book, all it said was, inside this notebook, it just said, "Good morning, sunshine. Welcome to the first day of the rest of your life." And the rest of the notebook was blank. So it was morning tea. I caught up with Fran because I could only imagine that it had been left by Fran because she had been, such a source of strength and confidence during, leading up to this notebook arriving. And sure enough, it was from Fran. And she gave me a couple of rules around this notebook. So the notebook would arrive on my desk every morning, and the only rule was that I couldn't take it home with me. It had to stay on my desk. And every day I would arrive to my office, and on my book would be the notebook. And every day for months and months and months, Fran would leave me a little piece of wisdom or an anecdote or a quick story or a drawing or something that was something that it was like little breadcrumbs of love, little breadcrumbs of compassion and empathy just to help me navigate through this time. And interestingly, every note that was left in that notebook was always so poignant to whatever I may have dealt with at home the previous night or day. And look, this was back in when we didn't have Facebook or social media. And eventually over time, I left that job. I got to a point where I was ready to take my notebook home. And not long after that, I lost contact with Fran. And it was some 10 years later that I saw this young guy on social media that I recognized instantly as Fran's son. And I reconnected with her. And it was during that reconnection that I came to discover that whilst that notebook had been pivotal in really helping me on my own journey of growth and expansion and really becoming this powerfully peaceful woman that I am today, not without its trials and tribulations over that 10 years, but running into her on this day, meeting up with her and having lunch, I kind of sat there and just poured out how wonderful my life had turned out. And I also went scrounging through my books to find this notebook because I had put it in storage because I'd traveled the world during that time. And I had it with me. But during our catch up, I was just going, yes, my life has been great. This has happened and this has happened and this cool thing's happened and my kids are great. And by the time I finished sharing, I looked across at her and said, okay, now it's your turn. And she began with, gosh, Jen, I don't even know where to begin. And then she poured out that her marriage had fallen apart. 18 months earlier, she had buried her youngest son. And a complete contrast to my last 10 years. And of course, we cried, and I remembered the notebook. And while I was looking at this woman, who had this, we'd both had these 360-degree, almost sliding door lives that was born from that original notebook. I'm sitting there across from her now, knowing that I knew she had the wisdom within. I knew she knew what to do, but I also could see, like most of us when we're in crisis, she'd forgotten. And then I remembered the notebook and I just looked at her and said, I know you know what to do. I know you have the wisdom. I know because you shared it with me 10 years ago. And I pulled out this notebook and she was just amazed that I still had it. And we pored over the pages and everything that she had written in her own handwriting in this notebook for me. And I could see that she too was able to reconnect to what I now know we all have. We all have this inner wisdom, this innate knowing that guides us. But sometimes our external world will pull us off track from that. So I offered the book back to her, the notebook back to her. She didn't want to have it. She wanted me to keep it, but I promised I would periodically send her photos of pages from the book, which I did. And it reminded me that I too had the capacity to write such a notebook of my own wisdom to share at perhaps a poignant time for any human being, to help them remember their own inner wisdom. So that is kind of the story of my book, how it came to be. And the notebook was just the beginning. The notebook from Fran was just the beginning for me. I had 10 years of really going on this quest, this unconscious quest. I didn't know I was on a quest, but I was on this quest. But that had been pivotal in really putting me on my path to continue to be curious, to continue to shine that giant awareness spotlight of mine inwards to myself for my own answers and my own wisdom, because that's where I knew that everything I needed for myself and my life existed. So yeah, that's the story of my book, Dom.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. It's actually great that your Mrs. Miyagi, in this case, actually stayed with you. Because sometimes when moments like that happen where you lose contact with somebody, it's like you lose contact with them forever. Like it was a chance encounter with one of those random angels disguised in human form from time to time.
Right. I think they exist too. And I think in the 10 years between losing contact with Fran and then reconnecting with her, and it was quite randomly 10 years later, because I had tried to find her. And, without social media, which makes it so easy to connect with people these days, this was before social media. And the only thing I had was a phone number and an email address. And eventually, over time, they stopped working. And of course, reconnecting with her 10 years later, I now know why, because she moved states and had lots of tragedy and trauma in her life. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It was great to stay real, to be able to reconnect with her. And I think I have this policy and philosophy around my friends, that my friends are what I call tens, you know. So 10 to me just means that it's a 10 out of 10 friendship, and 10 out of 10 friendships, once they're born, they don't need to be cultivated. They they're self-perpetuating, they're self-energizing. And that means that you can go a day or 10 years without seeing them, and the friendship is still nourished and buoyant. And yeah, so I think, that was a great lesson too, inside of connecting to Fran. She taught me that too.
Sweet. So what about the 8.5s?
The 8.5s, look, if I'm going to be super candid here, I think a lot of our family members are 8.5s, just simply because, we do have to, there is a little bit more requirement from us to sustain our family relationships. But I think those beautiful 10 out of 10 relationships, I would suggest that if anyone's listening and you know what I'm talking about, you maybe can count them on one hand. And I'm not in any way suggesting that we don't have the 8.5s or the 5s, but really honor and have some gratitude. If you have 10 out of 10 friendships, yeah, really honor that, because they are super special friendships. And I'm sure a lot of the listeners maybe at least have one or two people in their life that they know that they could go 10 years without seeing. And if they walked in their door right now, they would just pick up exactly where they left off. And I think if you do have those friendships, just salute yourself for creating that for yourself.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Funny enough, I do have a buddy like that. Hey, funny enough, he has a show of his own now, and he actually we actually knew we were elementary school buddies. We known each other since the third grade, but then I think it was around fourth grade he transferred to another school, and then we lost contact for about a good, my goodness, I think it was like 10 to 13 years. I mean, we occasionally would see each other every now and then, like a glimpse. I think I probably saw him like once, but that was like when I was in the car and I was sick riding with my parents or something. And then we just picked right back up
Mm,
even further. I think it was like 20, I think it was like 2015 we picked up again. And it's amazing. I was like, yeah, that's like the biggest thing is like, yep, we know each other since third grade. And I'm like, yeah, man, you had a 10-year break, so don't worry about my nonsense. It's okay. It's okay.
mm. I think it's such if we're looking for evidence in our lives of true unconditional love, and by love I'm not talking romantic love, but I'm talking love that is representative of deep compassion and empathy and connection. I think it's really worthwhile to just notice if you have one of those friendships, and notice it as evidence of your own ability to exude unconditional love out into the planet, because you have a friendship that exists purely on unconditional love. There's no conditions to the friendship, right? It's not I'll be your friend as long as you do this and this for me, and I do this and this for you. That's a conditional friendship. But an unconditional friendship can go 10 years without anything needing to keep it fulfilled, because unconditional love keeps it fulfilled. And I think that's a perhaps a really good metaphor for lots of things in our lives. Is there something in your life that you have put some conditions or restrictions on? And how could you potentially lift some of those conditions and restrictions to bring some unconditional love to the situation, circumstance, relationship, or whatever it is? That's a beautiful segue into that little bit of wisdom, Tom.
Ah, yeah, that's right. That's right. Got to get the honey out of your milk somehow. That's right.
I'm not sure what that means, but I'm just going to say it's a good thing.
Okay, that's good because I have no idea where I was going with that reference.
I just saved you.
Sometimes the
Uh,
mouth opens before the mind wakes up.
you know what? I don't think that you have a monopoly on that. I think there's around 8 billion people that occurs for as well. Uh,
That's right. It's true indeed. And it's kind of interesting, those two words you put together, conditional friendship. It's like, wow, conditional friendship. It's like, all right, we're friends under these conditions. And it's like, is that really, truly a friendship?
mm,
It's amazing.
mm,
It's like, sounds more like a transaction to me.
mm. And I think too that comes to something that came up in conversation with me in the last week, was a conversation around boundaries. And I think boundaries are a really important thing. However, I think that for me at least, boundaries and walls are sometimes confused. So, what do I mean by that? So, I think creating a boundary comes from your standards or your values. So, to create a boundary, we need to first be connected to our own values and our own standards. So, what does that mean? It's what do we and don't we accept for ourselves? My highest values are family, freedom, and fun. So I honor those values, and I set my standards in accordance with those values. So anything that will impede or impact my values is where I create boundaries. But I think the opposite of, boundaries is walls. And walls generally come from anger or upset or disappointment or a broken expectation. And that's not necessarily coming from a wholehearted standard or value that you have for yourself. And walls have a tendency to just block anything coming in and out. And that can be love or opportunities. Whereas a boundary is really you being really clear on your standards in connection to what you value the most. So it's more open-hearted. It's a little more open-hearted than putting up one of those, putting up something like a wall, which really is a blocker. It blocks anything from passing in and out. Mm.
Ah, yes, indeed. And definitely got to be careful about those walls, especially if folks don't put a mural on it
Mm.
either.
You bet. You bet.
Ah, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. That's right. Heck, maybe now to think about it, when you put up certain walls, it's like, all right, this is a boundary here for good reasons. Like, yep, let's just protect both of us in a way. So that way you can protect yourself from those who like to be negative and complain and without offering a
Yeah,
solution.
exactly. And, putting boundaries in place from that energy is because you honor yourself and you honor the other person. You're honoring yourself to be clear on your values and the standards that you set for yourself, but you're also honoring the other person to be where they are in their own personal evolution right now, which I think is for me, and I write about this in my book, it comes down to the concept of being right. So one of the where I see we get ourselves caught up in double standards, I guess, is where we're very clear on what is okay for us. So let's use that example of being able to, not wanting to be around people that are sometimes negative or sometimes, don't see the world as, through, glass half full glasses. But being able to honor that for yourself, but also being able to say, okay, I get that's where this person is right now. And I'm not going to judge them for where they are right now, but I'm going to also honor them to be okay with where they are right now. Now, what is the boundary I can put in place to honor both of us? Well, for me, the boundary would be that, particularly if it's a family member, and often it's those closest to us where we have the biggest difficulty in exercising our boundaries, is to perhaps have set, put in restrictions around how much of your time you spend with that person, and know that when you're with them, give them permission for whatever amount of time that you're with them to be who they are. There's an acronym for love, which I absolutely love. And it's L. So if you take the letters LOVE, to me, it stands for letting others voluntarily evolve. So what that means to me is I can be right that I'm right about what I believe and my values and my standards, but I can also let the person that's sitting opposite me right now, whoever that might be right about their beliefs, standards, and values. I don't have to make someone wrong to make myself more right. I can be right, and they can also be right, even if I don't agree with them.
Ah, yes, indeed.
And that's for you. That's for you. That brings peace to you. That this isn't about giving peace to the world, but interestingly, that's the byproduct of that. But that brings peace to you. That connects you to the power of your inner peace. When you no longer have to make someone wrong in order to make yourself right. You can be with both.
Sweet. Now we just need the keyboard warriors to understand that online.
and and I totally agree with that, Dom, and that was a big thing for me in my journey, because I used to try and convert the keyboard warriors. But instead of trying to do that these days, if I notice that that's occurring, what I also know is that for that to even impact me, my own container of love, compassion, and empathy isn't full. Because if it was full, that would overflow from me, not my need to try and fix these people that that are deemed that are being negative online. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen. Of course that happens. There's people out there doing that, and there's a lot more in this conversation than what I'm just going to touch on here and now. But some of those people, that's where they're at in their own evolution. That's the only set of lenses that they have to view the world through. But if you have a more evolved lens through which you can see the world, your job is to keep yourself as full to overflowing of love, compassion, and empathy as possible, because that's what will then flow from you, versus to needing to fix or make right that which is outside of you.
Ah, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. That's right. Gotta let others be comfortable in their own stage of evolution because all folks are changing, whether that's subconsciously or intentionally. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, for sure, Don. 100%.
Woohoo! Well, acronym machine. That's what I'm talking about. Love, compassion, and empathy. The LCE. That's what I'm talking about. That LaCie
Mm,
goodness.
mm,
Ah, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So,
yeah.
with all this magical peace you're helping others to at least drink of, in terms of from the chalice of wisdom that you're dropping in our wells at the moment, was probably one of the biggest things that helped you to become more empathetic, or at least get more empathy.
Um, do you know what? For me, it was this feeling that just kept bubbling up inside of me and I'm going to go back. This was probably going back. It's during the last 10 to 15 years. It was in 2005 when just to give people a relevance to the time story with Fran, it was 2005 when that occurred. So it's been a good 15 years since then. So perhaps going back around 10 years now, I started to notice that no matter what I did, no matter the achievements that I set for myself, no matter the success I had, I always had this heavy feeling inside my body that was almost like a whisper saying to me, not this. But there was this part of me that just kept telling me that if I just did more, if I just tried, if I just achieved this, if I just got success in this area, if my kids were happy, if my relationship was good, if my business was successful, then I'd be happy. So I was in this very, what I now know to be destructive chase of wanting to be happy and trying to create that happiness by managing all of my external circumstances. But what I started to notice for myself is no matter how great my outside world was, there was still this emptiness inside of me that just kept bubbling up, where I would just be unhappy again. And I'd have some success in a certain area, or I would achieve something and I'd feel good for a minute, and then shortly after I'd be feeling empty and hollow again. And it was at that point that I've always been curious, certainly since I met Fran. That was where my curiosity button switch got flipped. And so when I would notice that, I got really curious and began to, really turning the spotlight into on myself and looking at what is it that I can't see? What is it that I can't see here that no matter how much outward success I have, I'm still feeling empty inside. So figuring out what that was, which was something that happened when I was 5 years old, not anything tragic, but I had an experience when I was 5 years old that was where I received my first piece of accolade from the world. I first got the awareness that if I succeed at something, everybody loves me. I won a citizenship award in grade 1. And that was when a little 5-year-old me just figured out that, wow, if I succeed and do good stuff, the world loves me. But she also decided something else, that little 5-year-old. She kind of figured out the opposite of that as well, was that if I didn't succeed and do good, the world wouldn't love me. Now, fast forward that to, my mid-40s, which is where I was at this point. I was trying to create a world that was a false world, to not have the success, but just to fulfill this internal need of being loved that this little 5-year-old had created. So that was a really pivotal turning point for me when I realized that I had this pattern inside of me that was doing external things to try and fulfill this emptiness. And when I figured out that, when I stopped using the external world to try and fill that void, and I started doing things for myself, and knowing that the only person that could fill that emptiness was me, with love, with compassion, with empathy. When I started figuring that out, I started to really become this powerfully peaceful person that I am today, and people ask me all the time, how are you so peaceful and calm and, happy all the time? And the reason I am is because it has nothing to do with what's going on outside of me. For example, if you can imagine this, for example, I'll just use money as an example because people can really relate to money. So if you can know that you are whole and complete with $1 million in the bank, and that you are also whole and complete with $0 in the bank, you have kind of cracked the inner peace scenario. Now you can apply that to anything. You could also apply that to, are you whole, complete, and happy with a relationship? And can you be whole, complete, and happy without a relationship? Because this is, to me, is the entry point where we can start to become fully aware of where we are placing the outside world, external stimulus, where we're placing our power to be happy in those things. Because the power to be calm and peaceful and happy have got nothing to do with the outside world. Because, if that were true, it's nuts, right? It's like us saying $1 million is bigger than me. Being broke is bigger than me. None of them is bigger than you. Being in a relationship is bigger than me. Having no relationship is bigger than me. Neither of those things are bigger than you. You are the source of those things. They are not the source of you. They do not define you. And look, a great example of this that I love to use is I use the Oprah example. So if Oprah suddenly woke up tomorrow and all of her material possessions and her wealth was gone, she would still walk into a room, and when she opened her mouth and spoke, she would still be Oprah. She would still find a way to serve and give her gift. And I truly believe that's true for all of us. We all have the capacity to serve and be a gift and be an expression of contribution, an expression of love, compassion, and empathy, no matter what is on the outside of us, no matter what is happening in our external world. Now, is this easy? Is this easy? Yes and no. It's easy to understand intellectually, but it does take some daily practice, and I do mean daily practice, to begin to have this be something that is true for you on a daily basis. Because we forget, as humans, we forget. We can know something, and if we stop practicing it, we forget. So my book is filled with practices, actual tangible experiential practices that help anyone remember that they are the source of their love, compassion, and empathy, not the other way around.
Oh, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. That's right. Yes, indeed. Magic. That's right. Magic and even winning citizenship award first grade. Yes, indeed. That's right. That's what I'm talking about right there. That's what I'm talking about. And it's actually great that you brought up the point that it's easy to understand intellectually, but it's also hard to do in practice because it's so darn true, especially for the happy folks like ourselves who like to be cheerful around people, and especially if you're like that all the time. People like, hey, how are you so happy all the time? And it's like, hey, we're still human here.
Mm, mm.
It,
Yeah, look, I tell people all the time, I am not Zen Jen. I am not Zen Jen. Life happens to me just like it happens to everyone else. I'm not a millionaire. I don't have everything together. I deal with all of the same shit that comes at me like most people do. My family deals with stuff. I deal with stuff. The only difference for me is that I have a very strong understanding experientially in my body now, in my central nervous system, that whilst I may pass through what I call Shitsville, so if you think of the town of Shitsville, whilst I may pass through that town, I get the choice every second of every day as to whether I am going to unpack and live there, or whether I can just be with the understanding that I'm just passing through. Everything that's here right now is not here right now to stay. I often talk about being able to feel our feelings, and to me, that's one of the practices in really being able to stay connected to your own inner peace, your own inner compassion, inner empathy. And that's for you first and foremost. Giving that to yourself is the starting point. If anyone is listening to this, and I'm sure that you can think of someone who you would like to give some inner peace and compassion to, and some love to, have them know how to use it. The way to get that to happen is you have to go first. You have to be so overflowing with love, compassion, and empathy and peace for yourself first. Then that will overflow to the people around you. So, again, I often see people trying to fix the people in their life, trying to make them more compassionate and more loving and more peaceful, so that you feel better. It doesn't work that way. This is an inside job. The way we change the world is by changing ourselves, and the work to be done, the practice to be done is within. It's internal. It's intrinsic. It's not outside of us ever. And we come unstuck. We will become miserable if we try and tackle it the other way around.
that's right. Got to turn it around like the planet. That's right. Yes, indeed. And it's so darn true because I feel like some people still have that mentality. It's like, all right, I can change this person. I can take this quarter, this dime, and this hammer, and I can change this person, even though they might need just a spoonful of sugar and maybe a ticket overseas. I can,
I get it. Yeah, I totally am with you.
But yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And we all got to start with ourselves first because, I mean, that's the easiest place to start because, I mean, we're in our own bodies 24/7. I mean, unless you do that whole astral projection thing, that's kind of way out there for me. I'm not sure about you, but yeah, you're in the body
Mm.
24/7. So you definitely got to start where
Yeah,
it's home.
and I think definitely, and I think we need to at least think in those terms for the day to day because we are human first. We are all always going to be human beings, humanly conditioned to have a human experience, and that's us. That's who we are first and foremost. Everything else, is a byproduct of that. And not to say that in another 100 or even sooner, 100, 200 years, we will have evolved as humans. But right here, right now, today, this is this is what we've got. This is where we're at in the evolution of humans. So we have to work with what we've got to work with. We have to start where we are. If we try and go into the future and become, start from where we're not, again, that's a futile experience. We really only have right now. What's here with us right now.
That's right. That's right. Depends on here and the now. So speaking of inner work, what's probably the and that there may be more than one thing that really helped you to really do that inner work. But for those who may not be aware of what the inner work is and what that entails, what's probably a good place to start for those who need to get within themselves and figure out how they can make their lives better from just doing the inner work?
Mm. The thing that I would offer, just a simple tool that I would offer as a beginning point, is to encourage people, and I do encourage people to cultivate a relationship with their awareness. So, what does that mean? It means becoming more of the observer of you versus being thinking that you are your thoughts. So, for example, we often are just operating on autopilot day to day. We don't think about, brushing our teeth, having a shower, making coffee, whatever the day-to-day things are. We are largely doing those things on autopilot. The other thing that's occurring whilst we're doing those things on autopilot is our thoughts. Our thoughts are also on autopilot. We're not noticing our thoughts. We are largely identified with our thoughts. So if I was to get up now and go downstairs and make a cup of coffee, while I'm doing that, I'm also going to be thinking about, um, I've got to do this today. I've got to go here. Oh, I forgot to ring this person. I need to ring them. No, I won't ring them now. I'll ring them in an hour. So all of that inner narrative and dialogue is going on all the time. And that little voice that's running us 24/7 isn't just asking the questions, it's also answering the questions. So cultivating a relationship with our awareness is to spend time throughout your day just stepping out of yourself for 1 to 2 minutes at a time and begin to observe your thinking. Begin to just, you don't have to sit on a cushion and meditate for this. You could just be sitting having a cup of coffee and just for a few minutes, just notice your thoughts and notice that you are the one noticing the thoughts. Michael Singer, who wrote The Untethered Soul, said it best when he said, "You are not your thoughts, you are the one who hears them." So, cultivating a relationship with your awareness is beginning to bring practice to observing you as a third, you're the third party of you. And when you can begin to do that, it's like putting a pause point in your day. And it's the first step in really expanding and connecting to your conscious thinking. We spend 95% of our day in subconscious, which is automated thinking and actions. We're only having conscious thoughts and actions 5% of the day. So to begin to really become aware of our choices, reactions, responses in our day, we have to take a pause and start to notice, wait a second, who's thinking that thought? Why am I about to do what I'm about to do? Who's said that? Why do I think that? And just spend a few minutes every day just starting to become aware of the inner voice, the inner you that's running you 24/7. And over time, every time you do that, you're interrupting a pattern. You're interrupting automated thinking and actions. And in that moment, you have an opportunity to do or say something you wouldn't ordinarily do or say. And then start to clip this together over time. If you did this once a day, one tiny thing every single day will create a massive shift to who you are and your consciousness and your awareness and your ability to connect to the truth of who you are versus the little voice that's running you. It's hugely profound. But that would be my tip, to encourage everybody to just start by really just becoming aware. Spend some time being the third party of you. Spend some time walking around beside you. Just watch yourself. Just listen to yourself, just for a couple of minutes a day, and just notice what you're doing, what you're thinking. Who's thinking? Who's saying? Who's thinking the thoughts?
Yes, indeed. That's right. Just make sure the who is you. That's right. Forget about everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Yeah.
Yep. Because that's the one thing I've noticed after a while. Is like as a little younger, as a wee little toddler was like, yeah, maybe mind reading powers would be pretty good. And then as you get older and you see social media and you realize, you know what? I do not want mind reading powers. I think I will stay comfortable in my own head.
Definitely. Mind reading powers would be just, oh my goodness, that would just be information overload. It would just be there's enough going on in my own mind. I don't even I don't mind read myself, right? I'm not actually even hearing my own thoughts mostly. It would just, I can't imagine. It would just be overwhelming to have to take on being able to hear everyone else's when I'm currently, most humans are not even hearing their own. So yeah, that's probably a really good thing, Dom. That's probably a great little metaphor. Become a mind reader of your own mind. Listen to your own thoughts.
That's right. The Bible of you. That's what I'm talking about.
Mm.
Yes, indeed. And with this fabulous Jen Foster here, we're in the book of Proverbs right now in the Bible of you. That's what I'm talking about.
I love it. I love it. That is awesome.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So, when you're on these magical interview all over the magical globe, is there a question that you wish you would be asked more often when you're on shows like these, having conversations like these?
Hmm. That's a great question, Dom. A question that I would love to be asked more. Well, maybe sometimes what can be fun and what connects us all often more so is when there's a resonance, when you resonate with someone. So, maybe maybe a question that I would love to be asked is, what's a fun fact about you that nobody would know, or very few people would know, or the potential audience you're speaking to wouldn't know? Yeah, that could be a fun question, because you know people tend to like to be around people who they are like. So it might be a great way to have people know me on a different level other than the author of a book.
Yes, indeed. And funny enough, I skipped that question at the beginning to ask it now. So, for those who don't know you yet and have seen your magical website, notice that you were a personal trainer at one point. What's probably been one of the best lessons you learned from your travels to Saudi Arabia and all over the globe?
Mm. Look, the best lesson that I got was actually in Saudi Arabia. And it was because, just to give the backstory for the listeners, I had an opportunity in 2016 to pioneer a curriculum of health and wellness at a vocational college for women in Saudi Arabia. There were 4 campuses, one rather large campus in Medina, which is one of the biggest cities, but there were 3 small campuses in the north of Saudi Arabia, which is where I got to go and spend most of my time. Now, the capital cities have Western compounds, which is where Westerners live, which is really just like living in a patch of America or a patch of Australia in the middle of a country. But where I was, there were no compounds. So we lived in the community like local people. So all of us as teachers, we had an 8 apartments in a block, and we all lived together in this apartment block. So I went from living in Australia where I had this individualistic life where I could do whatever I want whenever I wanted, to being catapulted into a situation where I was living with, working with, shopping with the same 8 people day in, day out. We couldn't just, women, because of the laws of Saudi Arabia, at that point, the laws have changed now, but at that point we couldn't drive. So we had to have a driver. And our day looked like this. We literally got picked up from our apartment. We were taken to the driver dropped us at the college. We would then be in the staff room together in the college. At the end of the day, if we needed to go shopping, the driver would take us collectively shopping and then bring us home to this same apartment block where we all existed. Now, these teachers were from all around the world, so different cultures, different beliefs, different, upbringing, different everything. And there was this one teacher who truly pressed my buttons massively. And I saw her as rude, I saw her as obnoxious, I saw her as loud and overbearing, and who just, to me, wasn't a nice person. And for days, it would just it just went on for a couple of weeks where this woman every single day would upset me internally in some way. And eventually it got to the point where again, because I have, these tools, I looked at the situation and thought to myself, okay, because I was rallying the other teachers to get on board with me. And I was saying things like, don't you think she's this? And don't you think she's that? And to be honest, I couldn't really rally any real support around it. So that was my first insight, that this was inside me. The way I was viewing this woman, I had grown and into this thing that had taken on its own life. I could now no longer see her any other way than the way I had chosen to see her. So I started to think about it, and I thought, okay, if I can't, if everyone, I mean, look, of course, there are a couple of incidents where they went, oh, yeah, she's a little rude here or she's a little abrupt here, but no one was as upset about her as I was. So I looked at that and realized that there was a common denominator here, and the common denominator was me. So I went home that night and I thought to myself, okay, I have literally trained my brain over these last couple of weeks to only see this woman this one way. So if I can do that, I can also train myself to see her in another way. So I started to think about it. I started to think about her, and I started to ask myself, is there at least one quality that you can remember seeing in her that you did like? And I scanned back and had a bit of a think. And I remember that she had a bit of a dry sense of humor. She had this really dry sense of humor, and she'd said something in the early part of me meeting her that made me laugh. And I went, okay, she's got a really dry sense of humor. So I told myself for the next 2 to 3 days, every time she spoke, in my head, I would just say to myself, that's just Bushra being funny, whether she was being funny or not. But I would say to myself, that's just Bushra being funny. So for the next 2 to 3 days, that's what I did. Every time she said or did anything, I would catch myself going into the way I'd previously seen her, and I would catch myself and say, that's just Bushra being funny. And over the next 2 to 3 days, as I began to shift my perception, which I had to consciously do, this is that being conscious of our thoughts and our actions, I actually began to see this side of her that had always been there, but I had never been able to see because I had created this one-dimensional way of viewing her. And that is a thing in your brain. It's a thing in our brain called our RAS, reticular activating system. I won't go into the science of it, but there's some science behind it. But I completely, by catching myself out in only seeing her this one negative way and finding one thing to focus in on to see her in another way, over the course of a week, I completely transformed this woman right in front of my eyes. Now, the question I want to offer is, do you think she actually changed? No, of course she didn't. She was exactly the same person. I changed the way I viewed her. And I did that using my awareness to turn my spotlight inwards and to look for other possible perceptions. Wayne Dyers' explanation, his definition of a miracle is a shift in perception. We all have the power to shift our perception around anything and anyone, but we have to take the time to consciously do that. Now, the end story to this is the day I left Saudi Arabia, the very last person I said goodbye to and hugged and held for the longest time and told them that I loved them was this woman. And I still to this day have a beautiful friendship with this woman. Now, it could have gone any other way, right? Any other way. But this is the power we have, Dom, as human beings. This is why I call my book, The Power of a Peaceful Woman, because it is a powerful position to move through life from. It gives us the capacity to powerfully transform any situation, any relationship, any circumstance. And the shift comes through that shift in perception. Yeah, so that was huge for me. And I use that tool. That practice is in my book. And I use that one multiple times in a day in multiple ways. Is there another way I could see this? I ask that question a lot. Is there another way I could see this person? Is there another way I could see this situation? Is there another way I could see this circumstance? And can I bring some conscious awareness to only seeing it that way to help me shift into a more neutral, loving, compassionate, empathetic, unconditional perspective?
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, a classic example of seeing everybody as a nail and you having a hammer. Wasn't applied here. You actually saw the fact that this lady right here was a Phillips screw and you had a Phillips screwdriver. That's what I'm talking about.
Mm.
Yes,
Mm.
yes, indeed. Heck, that's probably going to be going in my toolbox now. Be like, yeah. It's like, yep, that's just them being funny.
Yeah, it was such a powerful thing to do. And it took a little practice, right? Because She was riling me up. Every time she spoke, I was getting irritated. But who was losing sleep over that? Not her, not a single other teacher, just me. So this isn't about practicing these tools is not for the outside world. It's not for the other person. It's for you. It's always for you. It's always about transforming your own inner peace and experience on the planet. Mm.
Ah, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. That's right. This peaceful woman right here, she is Jen the Builder. She's got a toolbox right here, y'all. That's right.
I don't think anyone would let me
That's
do any
right.
home handy repairs in their house. Just that's something, a little known fact about me. Don't give me a hammer or a screwdriver.
Well, that's too bad because you're going to be helping out folks in their human homes.
Mm.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about, indeed. So, coming down the pike here for the question that every guest gets to receive, and that is if you're to well, funny enough, actually, your birthday's tomorrow. That's the funny part about it. Considering at the time of this recording, that's the funny part about it.
I
But
love
if you were
it.
to wake up, if you were to wake up tomorrow, and instead of being insert random number here, you're actually 25,
Mm.
with all of your knowledge and experience, what advice would you give to yourself?
The advice I would give myself is to just relax and trust that everything is happening for you, not to you. Everything is happening for you, and it's going to be magical. It's going to be amazing.
Ah, yeah, she's got a wand too. All right. That's what I'm talking about. From overalls to a sari to a magical witch's outfit. That's right. She's got the magic wand, y'all. That's what I'm talking about. That's right. That Jen magic. That's right. Straight out the magical rabbit hat. Yes, indeed.
I've never been very good at magic tricks, actually. That's interesting too. My son is very, very good at card tricks. If I try and do a card trick, there is no sleight of hand. I may as well put cue cards down because it's that obvious.
See, yeah, you do have magic. It just got passed to someone else. That's all.
Uh,
Just had to play some hot potato. That's all. Well, for those who want to play lukewarm potato and hold your content and get in touch with all the stuff that you're doing, what's the best way for folks to reach out with to you?
Yeah, I think the best way would be just go straight to my website, which is all the W's, my name, Jennifer Forster, uh, which is JENNIF for Fred ER, F for Fred ORSTER.com. Just my name.com. And you'll find me there so you can find my social media links, you can find some free resources, you can find how to get a copy of the book. But yeah, the easiest way to find the book for globally is just to jump on your favorite book distributor, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Book Depository, Booktopia, all of whatever it is. Yeah, that would be the way to find the book other than locally.
Ah, yeah, well, there you have it, folks. Jenny from the Australian block, y'all. That's right. Jenny from the Aussie block. That's what I'm talking about right
Oh,
there.
that's funny. That is so funny. And yeah, please reach out to me and say hi. Don't be a creeper, obviously. Let me know that you heard me on Dom's podcast, Going North podcast. But yeah, reach out and say hi. I'm very open, very transparent, always down for a chat. So that's the Aussie in me. Loves a chat.
Ah, yes, indeed. That's right. That's right. She's cute and approachable, folks. She's both.
Oh,
That's what
that's
I'm
so funny, Dom. I love it.
Ah, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So, any parting words for the folks still listening?
Look, my parting words are always stay curious, be curious, get curious. And if you're already curious, get even more curious. Ask questions. Ask yourself every day, why is this important to me? And whether it's something that excites you or it's something that annoys you, get curious and ask, why is this important to me? Keep putting your thoughts and beliefs under the microscope. Keep peeling back the layers. Keep inquiring. Yeah, stay curious.
Hey there, you superstar. Thanks a bunch for making it this far in the podcast. Hope you really enjoyed it. Heck, if you made it this far, that means you really enjoyed it. Be sure to shoot the guest an email or head over to the social media pages and leave them a nice response that you heard them on the Going North podcast, so that way they can continue to be inspired to do great things. And be sure to share this podcast with others that you think would enjoy it as well.